afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our April Volunteer Training Tuesday. Very excited to have Caroline Hansen, who is the Hansen and Davison County 4-H Program Advisor, talking a little bit more about her soils to storage program that she did last year and will be kicking off again this year. So Caroline, I'm going to let you go ahead and share your screen and get us started.
Perfect. Can you see the correct screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. So as Jenae said, my name is Caroline Hansen. I am the 4-H Youth Program Advisor in Davison and Hansen counties. So I am located in Mitchell and in Alexandria. And I'm so glad to share this program with you. It was kind of a spur of the moment sort of passion project, I guess you could call it. And we had a lot of fun with it. So where we kind of started with the program was we wanted a way to we wanted to do a garden program, but we wanted it to be something more than that. We didn't want to just plant the garden beds and then wait until the end of the summer and go pick the produce and that sort of thing. And at our 4-H grounds, we already had the garden beds in place, and the Master Food Preservers program that SDSU Extension had started was brand new. It was newly launched. And so we decided to figure out a way to tie those two programs together, which is where we came up with the soil to storage. And we really realized that during COVID, we had a very high dependency on our grocery stores for some of our basic foods and our basic needs. And so, you know, I grew up in a house where we had a lot of canned goods. And so we always had, you know, some of those in storage in our basement. And so we wanted to provide an educational experience for these kids to learn different ways that they can store their food and how to make their fresh produce last a little bit longer. But of course, we also wanted to tie in that healthy eating and why it's important, and how, you know, in the dead of winter in South Dakota, we can still have access to fresh foods and stuff like that when we preserve them ourselves. So all of the funding for this program was through the South Dakota 4-H Leaders Association's mini grants. When we filled out that application, we applied for 15 youth. And so we asked for $200 to put on the program. And we ended up with 28 youth that actually participated. So nearly double what we expected. And so the Hansen County leaders also added an additional $100. So from purchasing all our plants to the cost of our canned goods, everything in between was covered with $300. So it was not a super expensive program to put on. And that was, again, with 28 kids. So, you know, you're looking at roughly $10 a youth for the entire program. If you have, now some of those expenses might be higher if you have to build flower beds and things like that, but definitely something that's doable for counties of any size. This was our registration form that we put together. We just asked them to fill it out. You'll notice on the registration form, if you can read it, it does say 4-H members. However, we did decide to open it up to any Hansen County 4-H youth, 4-H aged youth. And so we did have some non-members that participated. And we also had clover buds, which added an interesting twist and interesting challenge, I guess you could say, when because we had quite a few in that 5, 6, and 7 age group. And so keeping them entertained and busy was an added challenge when we're also working with our 14, 15, 16-year-olds. So this was kind of our quick schedule. I'll go through each week and kind of what we did there. But we started on May 25th planting our garden. And then in mid-July is when we did all our canning and preserving. And we scheduled it that way so that the kids could exhibit their canned goods in achievement days. So that was one of the goals of the program, was to increase our participation in our food preservation project area. And so we wanted to make sure that we had that done and completed in time for them to get it registered and also exhibit it at the county fair. So that first week we did May 25th, we planted all our gardens. We consulted with SDSU Extension master gardeners to pick the plants that would best grow well together and that would grow in our environment. So that was one of the connections that we made within Extension. We also purchased all of our plants from the Bridgewater Emory FFA chapter. And so we had FFA members who kind of helped us pick those plants out as well. So it was a learning opportunity for both the 4-H kids as well as the FFA members. And then our youth all came together and they got to pick which plants they wanted to plant in which flower bed. And we had 3 separate flower beds that they ended up planting. So that second week, we focused on herbs and spices. So we talked about different herbs that you can grow, their different flavors. I was not their favorite person that week when I made them try different herbs. Some of them enjoyed them, but we used taste testing to realize that why we use minimal of those herbs and spices in our cooking and flavoring and things like that. And so then after they had tried all of them, they got to have some popcorn and they got to pick which herbs they wanted to put on them. So if you're looking for an interesting new snack, dill was the top choice to put on popcorn, and it was actually quite good. So something to try there. The next week, week 3, we talked about composting and recycling. So we sorted different items that you can compost, that you can recycle, and then have to be put in the trash. And we talked about the importance of sustainability and using all the products that we can and not throwing things away if they can be reused in a different way. And so we made miniature compost bins using some shredded paper, some old expired and kind of rotting vegetables, and they found some grass and some leaves, and we added some soil and water, and we kind of shook them up and we stuck them in the corner of our old building, and those are still there, and we plan to pull them out and put them into our garden this year. We'd open them up and shake them around and add some more dirt and add some more water throughout the summer. And the hope is that we can use them as a nutrient source in our garden for this coming summer. And then the next week we talked about water. And so all the educational materials that we shared and we talked about were provided by SDSU Extension water resource field specialists. So there's was another connection to Extension that we made there. And they filter different kinds of water. And we started with some lake water. And then we also had jugs of water where we had added dirt and rocks and leaves and grass and things like that. And they had to use large rocks and sand and different soil types to try to filter that water to as clear as they could. And then we talked about carrying water and how in some places around the world, they have to carry their water for a long distance. And so even to do things simply like watering their garden, they have to haul the water to do that. And so they use different materials, including clay and Play-Doh and saran wrap and aluminum foil. And they had to build a vessel to try to carry water. And then we made it into a fun relay race. We broke them into teams and they had to do a relay and see who could fill up their little ice cream bucket the fastest. Week 5, we talked about other alternative food storage options outside of canning. So we talked about pickling, drying, freeze drying, fermentation, curing, and freezing. And we also made some refrigerator pickles. And so that was kind of their first take-home project, I guess you could say. So we made a brine and we cut up the cucumbers and they got to add garlic and dill and peppers and whatever they kind of wanted to into their little jar. And then they took them home and reported back the next week on what they thought of their pickles. Most of them really liked them. We did have a couple clover buds who maybe added a few too many peppercorns, who weren't the biggest fan. But they, again, got to experience that. And a lot of them said that once they ate their cucumbers, they added more in and made some more pickles. So that was cool for them too. And then week 6, we were joined by SDSU Extension nutrition field specialist from the Mitchell office. And she talked about healthy eating. So she talked about why our fruits and vegetables are important and what we can do to best utilize those, and all the different types of vegetables and fruits and things. And she had them play a couple games about identifying fruits and vegetables and where they grow and how they grow and things like that. And then she helped them create a veggie pizza using a bagel that they could create at home, even if mom and dad weren't home yet, as like an after school snack. So it was a healthy snack that they could create safely on their own at home, that they learned how to make that day. And then our final 2 weeks were spent in our canning. So we kind of combined the two. So week 7, the intention was to do our educational piece on canning. And then week 8 was going to be actually in the kitchen canning our products. But we kind of decided to revamp that schedule, a little bit. And we kind of combined the two and then split our large group into smaller bunches. And so we had 3 groups that came in for 2 hours, and they started with their salsa. So they first made their salsa mix that had to cook. And so they cut up all their tomatoes, they cut up all their peppers and their onions and added their spices and made everything into their pot. And then while that was cooking, they sat down and they had the educational component. And so then that's where our master food preservers, who led the whole workshop, basically, I purchased the supplies for them, and then they kind of took over. They talked about how to safely can and the different types of canning we can do, and how different foods require different processes and different processing times and things like that. So then when they were done with that educational piece, then they got to fill their jars, and we water bath canned all of their salsa. They didn't get to take it home that day because it had to sit overnight, but then they did get to pick it up and exhibit that in 4-H. We also made canned potatoes. However, potatoes, if any of you are canners, you'll know they have to be pressure canned. And so because the pressure canner takes so much time to get up to pressure and then actually sit and can it, and then it has to release all its pressure, we didn't have time for them to finish that process. So what we ended up doing is we kind of timed it out. So we had things going at every phase. So we had one pressure canner that while they were there was at full pressure, and we had one that was just getting done so they could see what they look like coming out of that canner. And then those, because they didn't make them themselves, they didn't get to exhibit, but they did get to take them home. And so they got to try that product as well. And we also had a variety of different fruits and jams and jellies and things for them to try, so that they could see that even though these peaches had been canned, for example, they still tasted like a fresh peach when they got to eat it. And so they could kind of see that even though these had been in a jar for 3 to 6 months, they still tasted like they were fresh. So here are just some pictures of the kids filling up their jars. They used their plastic jar funnels, and then they had headspace measurers that they all measured their headspace and got all their air bubbles out. And then we just wrote their name on the top of them so that we could keep them straight. And they each got to, like I said, fill up their own jar and then exhibit that in Achievement Days. So some of the outcomes and impacts, 75% of the youth said that they had not participated in any type of food preservation, and none of the 28 youth had ever canned before. And so it was a brand new experience for all of them. 50% of the youth had never cared for a garden. So they also got that as a new experience. And as I said in the beginning, one of our goals was to increase our participation in our food preservation project area. And that our participant number increased by 250% and our entry number increased by 130%. So a pretty substantial increase. And then we also had 3 entries from 3 of our clover buds at the county fair as well. So for this coming year, some of the plans we intend to implement is we want to add new lessons or kind of change some of our lessons so that our repeat participants are still getting something new. Hansen County is a very small county. We only have 50 youth enrolled total in our 4-H program. And so having 28 kids participate in our summer program, if we said it was kind of a 1 year and then you're done, we would lose a whole group of our audience. And so we don't want to do that. We want to encourage them to continue to participate. And so we're going to add in some new lessons and kind of change some things up as we go. And then we're also kind of adjusting the goals of it. So rather than trying to grow our project area, we want to kind of help maintain that. So now that we have youth interested in canning and gardening, we want to keep them interested. And we're also going to utilize some of those older youth who participated this last year to help plan those lessons and maybe teach some of the lessons, so we can use pieces of it to get to that youth planned, youth led, youth received design. Because we know our younger youth sometimes respond better when one of their peers is teaching them rather than an adult just standing talking at them. So that's kind of one of the goals we'll work for maybe a couple of the lessons to have them gain that leadership experience as well. So that's all I have for a formal presentation. Here's my contact information if you have any additional questions, but feel free to ask if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to answer them.